Hey, this is Ryan of Happy Healthy Vegan, and I'm very happy to have Dr. Joel Kahn, fresh from being on the Joe Rogan Experience a few hours ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be here. I'm kind of talking a little quiet here in the Delta Sky Club. I'm taking the red eye back to hometown Detroit tonight, but totally pumped to have sit in Elon Musk's chair.
Oh, you got the Musk chair. Awesome.
Yeah, I'm also extremely proud of 3 people on the Joe Rogan show. I'm the only one that swore.
Yeah, I did notice how they kept it, especially Joe. Yeah, you were the potty mouth.
The only F-bomb was fennel. It was actually very gracious. I have nothing but gracious things to say about Joe Rogan.
Yeah, I think he handled himself quite professionally, even though there were times I felt it was a little bit of 2-on-1 against you. But yeah, Joe tried, I think, his sincere best to try to be objective.
One vegan can whip the ass of 2 meat eaters, so it's no problem.
So one thing I noticed right from the bat is how Chris was very dismissive of the whole scientific enterprise of epidemiological studies. And you even called him out on it, say, Chris, I respect you, but even you're not powerful enough to just make epidemiological studies vanish and just say they're worthless from as far as meaningful science that we can extract from. However, I noticed how when it suited him, Chris was pulling out epidemiological these studies, but then he was saying, well, these are meta studies based on clinical trials, but still they're meta studies. So did you pick up on that?
You can't talk about dozens of randomized clinical trials of the paleo version, or he came up with a new word, the neovore, I think was the word, some combination between carnivore and Neolithic. I mean, you can't do it. There's a few, they're short. And they're not about the ultimate issue of survival or heart attack or stroke or cancer. They're about biomarkers largely. So, he was flopping around, mixing, various types of studies as if it didn't matter. And he knows his statistics. A lot of this has been clarified by Walter Longo, PhD of University of Southern California. And the cleanest way to talk about this stuff is, if you've got a nutritional theory, what's the biochemistry? Does it support it? What's the epidemiology? Does it support it? What's the randomized studies, if they exist? Does it support it? What do the centenarian studies of people over 100 that are healthy support it? And, I must have said that 12 times. Let's go back to all 4 from a very high level and look at the whole big picture, not looking at a single study that nobody can really view here, and that I certainly was unfamiliar with these strange studies he was pulling up, because there are some very famous ones, Siri, Torino, and Chowdhury, that the pro-saturated fat, pro-meat eaters tend to go back to, but he just blew right by those, which I was surprised.
Yeah, it was really frustrating seeing that happen. There's always going to be an outlier study or 2 or 3 or 4 to sort of disprove, to speak other, have a different conclusion than what the mainstream is saying. But yeah, Joe kept asking that. He tried to phrase it 10 different times, so why is what Chris is saying is wrong? And he never got through that. Yeah, just because Chris has a few outlier studies, it doesn't prove the broad breadth of the research. And you said the other pillars that go beyond the science, the biochemistry, longevity studies, etc. So yeah, that's what's wrong with Chris was saying. Just he had a few outlier studies, and those do not disprove the preponderance of the other data.
And the other thing was, Joe was pushing, do you have anything newer than that or newer than that? Penicillin beats down pneumonia. We learned that a long time ago. Do we need a 2018 study to know that antibiotics treat pneumonia? There's nuances to that, but of course we don't. And when you have really solid science, the stuff identified in the 50s, 60s, 70s is very relevant and doesn't really, it's all additive and cumulative. In fact, I think the only really new science we talked about from at least our plant-strong perspective was, this compound called TMAO, this idea of meat allergy, and some of these other kind of newer reasons that only add to the concern that when you add animal products to your diet, you're exposing yourself to a range of health problems that we've learned 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. We can bring it up to 2018 and talk about some new syndromes that should concern the public. So I'm glad all that stuff got out. You always wonder at the end of the day how many listeners in either how many plant camp listeners are going to have a steak tonight. I don't think any. How many steak camp followers are going to add spinach or kale or broccoli to their dinner? I think a few will.
Hopefully,
I think
so.
Powerful statement was Joe said, "I eat vegetables with every meal." God bless you. And don't eat crap. Good. So if tonight you have your steak with spinach and kale, and you don't go to McDonald's, then we accomplished something positive, meaningful for the general public, not for those of us that kind of get where plant nutrition benefits.
I have to say, watching the debate, it was a little bit of a struggle for me watching Joe Rogan struggle with you. Joe was hung up on how your studies came from decades ago. And you were Joe couldn't understand. You were laying that there is a foundation of knowledge that's been built upon for decades of science, decades of research. And yeah, sure, new things are discovered along the way, new parts of the puzzle. But Chris seemed to be advocating that, no, that science is bogus. There's been an extreme paradigm shift in the science. So all that science from the 70s is irrelevant. And you're trying to say, no, it has been known for decades and it's been expanded on. Chris is arguing paradigm shift. Is that kind of the vibe you got from Chris?
Yeah, because, really and authentically, there really wasn't much squawking about what we spent half of the 4 hours on.
Yeah. Saturated fat for 2 hours.
Meals high in saturated fat by eating chicken, cheese, meat, and such, that those promote the development of high cholesterols and heart disease. Until 2010, there wasn't a vigorous movement that said that science was wrong. And it was a dairy industry-funded movement to move the needle back that milk, dairy particularly, is healthy, because that was their, obviously lobby interest. Of course, the red meat and the chicken industry and everybody else benefits by that general confusion. I mean, I have no doubt it's not conspiracy. This is just multi-billion-dollar business. I mean, they're fighting back and they're losing the battle, but they're going down with a fight. And, really the fact that there is more confusion in the last 8 years is nothing about the confusion of human physiology. We haven't learned anything different about what I kept going back to, what basic science of saturated fat and what happens in your liver and your muscle cells and LDL receptors and all.
The plain biochemistry, which is pretty much irrefutable. That's really not subject to refute. It's just how things work.
Yeah. And, he didn't want me to mention that the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1985 was on this topic and has never had any reason to question its authority of science. And it's very relevant when you study deep. But again, I thought one of the more poignant moments, very honestly, because I knew we'd get to nutrient deficiencies in vegans and supplementation. I mean, it's one of Chris's topics all the time, was just popping a couple. I'll reveal the secret. They were Dr. Joel Fuhrman's multivitamin. Really, if you're interested, it does cover the base of almost every possible nutrient that you could be exposed to, although very few really are suffering any problem from iodine deficiency and others. And then a couple hits on a spray that gives you vitamin D, B12, and algae DHA, which I actually encourage people to take. I know there's some mixed feeling, and I don't feel we have to prove this is such an amazing diet that a single supplementation, denigrates all of the health benefits. It's more powerful. And, again, over and over, we're not getting excess saturated fat. We're not getting any cholesterol. We're not getting many inflammatory molecules. And again, where the trap so often is most of the studies Chris was talking about are what are called biomarker studies. And again, it's great if inflammation, it's great if your blood sugar, it's great if your waistline goes down. Those are important. But one, that doesn't mean it's going to be sustained, because the only 2-year paleo study showed no difference in weight between a controlled diet and the paleo diet at the end of 2 years. And that's recent study. And number two, biomarkers are important, but people don't die of a biomarker excess or deficiency. I mean, these are lab values. You die of a heart attack, you die of a stroke, you die of cancer. And until there's more data, we know where the trends are in healthy plant-based whole food eaters. Lower risk, possibly longer lifespan, clearly the ability to lower our risk of developing chronic disease. We know that. I mean, 12 years of data with the paleo diet, which Kresser really isn't the original concept of paleo. You can add legumes and dairy back in and call it paleo, which is why he's come up with, the Kresser diet. But the Kresser diet doesn't have any published studies, and the Kresser diet doesn't give people confidence that they're making optimal health decisions. He's a good guy. He looks good, but what I would have interjected, and frankly, there was just too much, is, again, Dr. Walter Longo at USC says, if you're going to fly cross country, are you going to design and build your own airplane, or are you going to hand that over to experts? That making nutrition decisions should be as fundamentally important to you as the airplane concept, and give it up to experts who are seriously involved. Now, Chris is not doing original science. Frankly, I'm not either, and I wouldn't claim I am. But I'm going to have lots of confidence in Dean Ornish, lots of confidence in Joel Furman and published studies, lots of confidence in Caldwell Essos and Neil Barnard. I don't want to leave anybody out. And Walter Longo, not usually in the camp necessarily of what we call our plant-based movement, but when he's eating 19 to 21 meals a week that are plant-based and teaches the world that is the route to longevity, I think we can take him under our fold as, much more compatible with what we're teaching than what Kresser's teaching, and he's world-class.
I want to point out something, or expand on something you said a few minutes ago about the dairy industry funding science, finding willing scientists to go along with their program of creating doubt as their product, much like the cigarette industry did. And
that is not conspiracy.
Yeah, Rogan shut you down. He said, we will not go down this road of conspiracy theory. However, I guess I'm assuming he's not aware of the facts that these documents have been linked out. I've watched them on nutritionfacts.org. Information has come out saying that all we want to do is create doubt. We're going to find sympathetic scientists. We don't need to win the battle, as you said. And another thing you touched upon, how Chris was going on like the hit parade of vitamin and nutrient deficiencies that vegans get. As I predicted, a video I made last week, what will Chris say in this debate? And I'm surprised you didn't call him out more on calcium and B12. Like you said, yeah, if that's the worst thing you have to do as a vegan is take a B12 supplement and all the benefits that come with a vegan or plant-based diet, if that's the worst thing and not animals don't have to die on top of that, I'll take a B12 supplement for the rest of my life. It's no big deal. But calcium, I mean, I've done tons of videos where anti-vegans come out and say we're deficient in all these minerals, and calcium comes up on the hit parade. You're a medical doctor. Am I right? Calcium is not.
Like, and I said this a number of times, probably the first time Rogan ever heard it, that differentiating animal protein from plant protein, limiting animal protein through most of your life is the hottest and cutting edge anti-aging longevity science, something Rogan never heard of. Meat, protein, muscle, live long life is not the data. I mentioned Morgan Levine, a Harvard researcher, and a researcher named Song. Similarly, you clearly need calcium for general health. Sourcing it from dairy is seemingly not promoting health, and you surely don't want excess calcium in terms of supplements. We've got our greens and all. Frankly, I think the point was lost on the public. The true data is that the paleo diet is shown very often, the kind that's really in the literature, which omits dairy, to be often a low calcium form of eating, and it's been kind of criticized, which is why I think Chris added back dairy with all its negative consequences.
And Chris is promoting, since vegans are eating all these are not getting all these nutrients, which I disagree with. I mean, all my blood lab results have been perfect. Everything's within range, never been deficient in calcium. My B12, at least serum levels, are in the top like 90% of Americans and Canadians. But he's talking about how humans need to eat these nutrient dense foods. Like, humans have been seeking and had access to like super nutrient dense foods across the world.
Take a mollusk and wrap it in a little bit of cow liver and douse it with a little magic pixie dust, and you're 100 years old, just like they do in Okinawa.
Why do we need nutrient dense foods? It's like, if I'm already getting all the nutrients I need, as according to all my blood labs, the whole 8 years I've been vegan show, why do I need more? Is it an arms race? He who gets the most nutrients wins?
we have nutrient-dense foods. They're called tubers. They're called called cruciferous vegetables, and they're really the top of the food pyramid that everybody should eat, and that Ray Cronise teaches so well if anybody looks up his work.
It makes it sound like, yeah, if you're not eating cow liver organs or whatever, you're going to die. You're not going to get all these nutrients.
What's his name? Kresser glossed over it. He actually the idea that there are different amino acid contents in meat versus plants was brought up. It's a science, it's strong science. So Kresser recommends, since he knows that eating meat exposes you to more, it's called methionine, which is very much linked to accelerated aging. He recommends his blogs, well, you got to be sure you eat the whole animal. So eat the chicken legs and eat the chicken toes and eat the pig knuckles, because these are very rich in certain collagen disgusting parts. So I'd like him to convince the public this is a great diet. Just be sure you suck on an oxtail every night. This is what he writes about. It's such a unappealing diet to the public, so he downplays it, but it's simply not necessary, and easier just eat a plant diet that's naturally low in methionine, and you don't suck on an oxtail. But
yeah, we should be dead. We're not eating oxtails. And on B12, I mean, yeah, I pointed out in my video I made last week how I've seen studies that show that his numbers are off. In fact, 40% of Americans are either low or below low in B12. And you're a medical doctor. I've never seen, tell me if I'm right or wrong, if a person is low in B12, the medical remedy is not to eat meat. It's right. It's to take a B12 supplement. Am I correct in that?
No. The best thing I read about it, you may have been the one that told me this example. If you think you need to get B12 by filtering it through a cow, why don't you feed your pet coffee and just clobber your pet and drink your caffeine through your cat or dog or bird or something. I mean, it's a disgusting thought. You don't need a cow to get B12. They have to actually put B12 in the nowadays, because these cows are not out there grazing for 98% of American meat. It's simply an obscene way to think about getting B12. I mean, you do want to supplement. The risk of being low is small, but you just no point in taking it. It doesn't help us to have plant-based eaters that show up in the neurology office and have neuropathy when you just could have taken a little bit of B12 3 times a week. So, don't be a dumb vegan. I said it on the show. I've written blogs, not to offend, but we have so many advantages. If there's 2 or 3 holes in the diet that have a easy solution, great. We solved the problem. It's not a problem once you solved it. So I had a much more fun morning with somebody your listeners may not know.
Yeah, you went out with Bassem Youssef, right?
Right. So if anybody doesn't know, and you should follow this guy on social media, like 10.5 million Twitter followers.
Whoa.
Bassem Youssef, Youssef. On Twitter, it's B Youssef, Byousef. But he was actually a cardiac surgeon in Cairo in his late 30s. When the Arab Spring broke out in 2010, he got caught up in the whole emotion of everything. He was very much a fan of Jon Stewart. And he said, I'm going to do political comedy with my camera in Arabic from Cairo, never been done in the Mideast. And within a very short time, he had 40 million YouTube followers following his show. So it's insane. They scooped him up on TV and put him in a show. Jon Stewart came out one day and did his show in Cairo. He flew out to LA and did John's show in LA. But after about 3 years, the government said, no, you're touching too close to the regime. And he had to flee Egypt very quickly with his wife and 2 kids. And he went to LA. So he's relaunched his career as stand-up comedian, author, and world health advocate, because in 2013, a friend of his with multiple sclerosis actually was able to beat the disease with a plant diet. He was so impressed by it that Bassem is now hardcore, total, 100% plant-based advocate. So I spent an hour with him this morning in LA, filming a segment of what will be a multi-series worldwide show that's launching in January called Plant B, Plantb, but you'll hear about it in January.
Wow.
English and Arabic, teaching that meat in the Arab world and dairy in the Arab world and, all kinds of standard diets, grilled meats, is destroying their health, and that he is a medical doctor and he's recording Esselstyn and others like that. Very cool. So we talked a lot about the role of meat in diabetes. We talked about erectile dysfunction. We went into olive oil. We went into honey. I mean, a bunch of topics. An incredible human being. And you should follow him. You should support him. He's as much inside our movement as anybody, but relatively new. The Plantrition Project and Scott Stoll have kind of taken him under their wing to introduce him around. So that's how I kind of got introduced. But it was one of the most fascinating hours I've ever spent.
You've had a most incredible week, it sounds like. Your Dr. Oz show aired and Rogan, and you've been communicating with
Larry King yesterday for an hour.
Larry King, how can I forget that too? Yes. I mean, and it sounds like things are really happening for you right now. So in case some of our viewers don't know how to find you, where's the best way to stay in touch with Dr. Kahn?
Sweeping the floors at Green Space Cafe in Ferndale, Michigan tomorrow because the reality when I land, and that's somewhat true. And 2 restaurants in Detroit and a food truck in Austin, Texas called ATX Food Co. But I'm at drjoelkahn.com, DRJOELKAHN. But really, it's Instagram and Twitter, DRJKAHN, Dr. J. Kahn. I've already posted the whole Rogan, but be ready. It's like 3 hours and 50 minutes of the whole Rogan thing. The Bassem thing will be out in January, so I got a hold on that.
All right. So when are you coming back out? Because I was really hoping to see you on this trip, but you're just way too busy.
November 5th and 6th. There's actually at University of Southern California, there's a world symposium on fasting and medicine.
Oh, okay.
So nobody's eating meat when they're fasting. So that's a vegan activity. You got it?
Wow. Well, will you be out for how many days then?
I'll probably be in town for about 3 days. It actually turns out, just to give a shout out, that probably the world's leading expert on the impact of fasting on health. You can say True North water fasting. Mm-hmm. But there's a new program of plant-based, it's called fasting mimicking diet, 800 calories a day. It's a plant diet developed at the University of Southern California.
Dr. Longo
is just cranking out patents for new findings on impact on health and longevity. It's the first program in the world to actually obtain a patent on longevity and health span. There's no other treatment of any kind in the world patent in the United States for extending health span and longevity. But just wait till you see what's coming out with this plant program of reduced calories for the microbiome, for autoimmune, for brain health. I'm so excited because it's another little piece to say, we are clearly in the right segment of the food groups, because when you really take our general love for plants and avoidance of animals and add in this basic biochemistry, science, randomized studies, and the whole thing, and give it to a scientist like Walter Longo, I mean, the magic that's happening out of LA and reaching worldwide is incredible.
Well, so let's stay in touch. We'll have to hook up then. Before we go, I want to tell you my favorite part of the Joe Rogan experience today was when you brought up how the only diet in the world that's scientifically been shown to actually reverse coronary heart disease is a whole food, plant-based diet. And Chris Kresser couldn't accept that. He goes, hey, my diet probably does too. As far as we know, it does. We just haven't done the science to prove it yet. But I'm pretty sure it does that. What'd you think of that response? I was laughing.
Well, it's about 41 years since a very young Dean Ornish launched those studies. And I'd say it's about 67 years since a internist in Los Angeles, Lester Morrison, who very few people know but should, launched his studies, and Nathan Pritikin. So I would say if we think it out, this is 2018. By about 2000, am I right? Yeah, about 2080, we'll have the data, because it takes about that long to actually go through the whole process to actually show data that you're reversing atherosclerosis. Yeah, it's a little presumptive to say it probably does when you're dealing with a disease that actually kills people. It's completely unethical to design a study of his eating pattern without having the control group being the Ornish, Esselstyn, whole food, plant-based, naturally low in oil, naturally low in fat, no oil diet. It'd be unethical because that's already proven. So if he wants to go head-to-head with the Big Daddy, or any other diet wants to go head-to-head, they're going to have to use the right control diet, which is the plant reversal diet that we're all familiar with and should be very proud of.
I just thought he just committed a huge technical foul there, assuming that until proven otherwise, we should assume that his diet also reverses heart disease when we have absolutely no reason to believe that. So I don't know. I was.
We all give homage to Michael Greger. He goes, if the only thing that plant-based diets did was reverse the number cause,
it still should be king, yeah,
and nothing else. And I got in as much of that quote as I could because it's true. It's amazing. That is an accomplishment we can be proud of, and it's real and it's authentic and it happens and it's relevant every day in my practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Anji and I have both lost close family members to heart disease. It's serious. It's real. So yeah. On that, thanks so much.
I gotta say, Larry King, Bassem Youssef, Joe Rogan, Chris Kresser. This has been the most fun hanging with you, Ryan.
Oh, thanks, Dr. Kahn. I was really looking forward. Anji can verify. I was really been talking about the past weeks. I really want to bro down, spend some quality time with you. So let's make it happen. I know I've seen you come to Southern California time and time again for the various Veg Fest here, and you're back out in November. So let's just stay in touch and let's have some quality time together and make a video in person.
Good deal. See you soon.
All right. Thanks so much. And remember, guys, let's keep it carved, guys. Keep it carved.